My husband's hand struck my face with such force that I stumbled backward, crashing into our marble kitchen counter. The sting of betrayal hurt more than the slap itself. As I touched my burning cheek, I looked into the eyes of the man I once loved and saw nothing but greed staring back at me. "You'll sign those papers, Sarah. Whether you like it or not," he snarled, his expensive watch glinting under our kitchen lights as he pointed at the sale documents on our counter. Little did he know, that slap would be his biggest mistake. By the time I was done with him, he'd lose everything, not just the $2 million apartment he was so desperate to sell. "Hi, I'm Sarah. 6 months ago, I was living what seemed like a perfect life. I had a successful career as a real estate agent, a beautiful apartment in downtown Seattle that my grandmother left me, and what I thought was a loving marriage. Now, I'm about to tell you how it all fell apart and how I fought back. 3 years ago, I met James at a charity gala. He was charming and successful and seemed to share my values. He worked as a senior developer at a prestigious tech company, drove a Tesla, and had the kind of smile that could light up a room. We dated for a year before getting married in an intimate ceremony on the rooftop of my apartment building, the same apartment that would later become the center of our destruction. "You're really lucky to have inherited such a prime piece of real estate," he'd said during our first date, admiring the view from my balcony. Back then, I thought he was just making conversation. Now I realize he'd been calculating from the very beginning. The first signs of trouble appeared when James lost his job. He came home one evening, loosening his tie with shaking hands. "They're downsizing the entire department," he explained, pouring himself a generous glass of our most expensive whiskey. "But don't worry, honey. I've got some amazing business opportunities lined up." I wanted to be supportive. After all, isn't that what marriage is about? Standing by each other through tough times? So I listened as he talked about his new business ventures, about his connections with promising startups, about all the money we could make. What I didn't know then was that behind his confident smile and smooth talks, James was drowning in gambling debts. Those business meetings he kept having? They weren't with investors, they were with loan sharks. 2 months after losing his job, James started pressuring me to sell my apartment. "Think about it, Sarah," he'd say, wrapping his arm around my shoulders while we stood on the balcony. "We could use the money to invest in something bigger. This place holds too many memories of your past. Don't you want to build our future?" Each time I refused. This apartment wasn't just a piece of real estate, it was my last connection to my grandmother, the woman who raised me after my parents died. Every corner held precious memories: the kitchen where she taught me to bake cookies, the living room where we spent countless nights watching old movies, and the study where she encouraged me to pursue my dreams. But James wouldn't take no for an answer. His sweet talks turned into arguments. Arguments turned into threats. And finally, threats turned into violence. The day everything changed, I had just returned from showing a penthouse to clients. James was waiting in the kitchen with a man I'd never seen before, tall, wearing an expensive suit that couldn't hide his menacing presence. "Sarah, perfect timing," James said, his voice too cheerful. "This is Mr. Chen. He's very interested in buying our apartment. I've already drawn up the paperwork." "Our apartment," I put down my purse, my heart racing. "You mean my apartment? The one that's only in my name?" That's when I saw the flash of anger in his eyes, the mask of charm slipping away to reveal something darker underneath. Something dangerous. "Don't be difficult about this, Sarah," he warned, stepping closer. "Just sign the papers." No, my voice was firm, even though my hands were shaking. "This apartment is not for sale. Mr. Chen, I'm sorry you've wasted your time, but—" I never finished that sentence. That's when James slapped me, his wedding ring cutting into my cheek. Mr. Chen quietly excused himself, leaving us alone in the tension-filled kitchen. As I steadied myself against the counter, something inside me hardened. I wasn't just angry, I was done. Done being manipulated, done being threatened, done watching the man I loved turn into a monster. James stormed out, slamming the door behind him. I slid down to the kitchen floor, my cheek throbbing, and pulled out my phone. With trembling fingers, I called the one person I knew I could trust, my best friend Lisa, a detective with the Seattle PD. "Lisa? I need your help. And we need to be careful about this." Lisa arrived at my apartment within 30 minutes. One look at my face and her professional demeanor cracked. "I'm going to kill him," she said, gently touching the bruise forming on my cheek. "Let me call this in right now." "Wait," I grabbed her arm. "I need to be smart about this. James has been acting strange for months, and I need to know what he's really up to before we do anything." Lisa sat down at my kitchen counter, her detective instincts kicking in. "Tell me everything." So I did. I told her about the suspicious phone calls, the mysterious business meetings, and the mounting pressure to sell my grandmother's apartment. As I spoke, Lisa's frown deepened. "Sarah, this doesn't sound like just a desperate husband," she said, pulling out her notebook. "The way you describe these meetings, the types of people showing up, there might be something bigger going on." "What do you mean?" "Let me run some checks on these names you mentioned. Especially this Mr. Chen." She paused, choosing her words carefully. But first, we need to make sure you're safe. Do you have somewhere else you can stay? I shook my head. This is my home, Lisa. I'm not leaving. Then we're setting up cameras. Today she pulled out her phone. I know a discreet security company. And Sarah? Start documenting everything. Every conversation, every meeting, every text. We're going to need it. Over the next few days, I became a spy in my own home. Tiny cameras hidden in light fixtures captured James's every move. A voice-activated recorder lived in my purse. I kept my face neutral when he apologized for hitting me, accepting his expensive peace offerings, a Gucci bag, and diamond earrings while silently photographing every gift. Baby, I'm sorry, he'd say, pulling me close. I've just been under so much pressure. These investors, they're not very patient people. If we sell the apartment, all our problems will go away. Don't you want us to be happy? Each sweet word felt like poison. Where had my loving husband gone? Was he ever real to begin with? A week after the slap, Lisa called me to meet at our usual coffee shop. Her face told me she had news before she even sat down. Your husband's been busy, she said, sliding a folder across the table. In the past year, he's taken out loans from some very dangerous people. He's also been spotted meeting with known members of a money laundering ring. My hands shook as I opened the folder. There were photos of James meeting with various men, including Mr. Chen, in parking garages and empty restaurants. Bank statements showed massive transfers. Property documents my heart stopped showed failed attempts to forge my signature on sale papers. He tried to sell my apartment without me. Lisa nodded grimly. 3 times. Each time, the forgery was caught by the bank. But Sarah, he's getting desperate. These people he owes money to? They're not the type to take no for an answer. Just then, my phone buzzed with a text from James having some friends over for dinner tonight. Wear something nice. I looked up at Lisa, my mind racing. His business partners are coming to our home tonight. Perfect. Lisa's eyes gleamed. Time to find out what they're really planning. But first, let's go shopping for some new dinner party accessories. She patted her purse where I knew she kept her surveillance equipment. That evening, I dressed in the red cocktail dress James had recently bought me, pinned up my hair, and strategically placed Lisa's newest recording devices around our dining room. James came home with 3 men, including Mr. Chen. The others introduced themselves as Mr. Park and Mr. Wilson, though something told me those weren't their real names. Sarah, darling, James said, his arm around my waist squeezing a bit too tight. Why don't you open that bottle of Bordeaux we've been saving? As I moved around the kitchen, playing the perfect hostess, I listened intently to their conversation. They spoke in careful terms about investments and property acquisitions, but underneath ran a current of threat. Time is running out, Mr. Park said quietly to James when he thought I was out of earshot. If you can't clean the money through real estate, we'll have to find other solutions. I nearly dropped the wine glass I was holding. Money laundering. That's what this was all about. James hadn't just gambled away his money, he'd gotten involved with criminals who needed to clean their dirty cash through property sales. And my $2 million apartment was supposed to be their perfect solution. Looking at James laughing with these criminals in my grandmother's dining room, something snapped inside me. This was no longer just about saving my home. I had to stop them before someone else became their victim. I shot a quick text to Lisa under the table, got everything on tape. Time to plan our next move. Her response came immediately on it. Don't let them suspect anything. The trap is almost ready. I smiled at James across the table, raising my wine glass in a toast. He had no idea what was coming. Sometimes the perfect revenge isn't about getting even, it's about serving justice, and I was about to serve it ice cold. The next morning, I woke up to James kissing my forehead, acting like the perfect husband again. I've got another meeting with Mr. Chen today, he said, adjusting his tie in our bedroom mirror. He likes you, by the way. Says you'd make a great business partner. I forced a smile, my stomach turning. Really? Maybe I should come to the meeting then. James froze for a split second, so brief anyone else might have missed it, but I'd gotten good at spotting his tells. No need, honey, just boring paperwork stuff. As soon as he left, I called Lisa. They're meeting again today. Perfect, she replied. The surveillance team is ready. Just keep playing along like we discussed. For the past week, Lisa had been building a case. The recordings from our dinner party had given the police enough evidence to start an official investigation. Now, they just needed to catch them in the act. I spent the morning going through our bills, finding more evidence of James's lies, hidden bank accounts, mysterious wire transfers, even a second phone bill I hadn't known about. With each discovery, my determination grew stronger. Around lunchtime, James called. Baby, great news. Mr. Chen wants to make an offer on the apartment today. I'm bringing the papers home tonight. Actually, I said, my heart pounding. Why don't I meet you guys at the office? If we're doing this, I want to be involved. There was a long pause. You're finally on board. Well, you were right. Maybe it is time for a change. 2 hours later, I walked into the sleek downtown office building where James said they were meeting. Lisa's team was already in position, disguised as office workers and maintenance staff. I found them in a corner office. James, Mr. Chen, and 3 other men I recognized from their criminal files that Lisa had shown me. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from anticipation. Sarah. James looked surprised but pleased. You're just in time. We were just reviewing the final numbers. I sat down at the table, looking at the papers spread out before me. Fake documents, inflated prices, everything Lisa had warned me about. Before I sign, I said, opening my purse, I just have one question. I pulled out a stack of photos, surveillance shots of their previous meetings, bank statements, everything we'd gathered. Would you like to explain what these are? The color drained from James's face. Mr. Chen's expression hardened. Where did you get those? James whispered. Funny thing about being a real estate agent, I said, my voice steady. You make all sorts of interesting connections. Like my best friend Lisa, you remember her, right? Detective Lisa Martinez. As if on cue, the office door burst open. Police officers flooded in, led by Lisa herself. Everyone stay where you are, she shouted. You're all under arrest for conspiracy to commit money laundering and real estate fraud. The next few minutes were chaos. Mr. Chen tried to run but was tackled by an officer. 2 of his men reached for weapons but quickly thought better of it when they saw the police had them surrounded. And James? My husband just sat there, staring at me with a mixture of shock and hatred. You set me up, he said as an officer handcuffed him. I stood up, finally letting my anger show. No, James, you set yourself up. The moment you decided to betray me, to hit me, to try to steal my home, you did this to yourself. Lisa read them their rights as they were led away. Through the office windows, I could see news vans arriving. By tonight, everyone would know about the real estate fraud ring that had been operating in our city and how it had been brought down. Back at my apartment that evening, I stood on my balcony looking at the city lights, the same view my grandmother and I used to enjoy together. For the first time in months, I felt at peace. My phone buzzed with a text from Lisa, just finished processing them. James is singing like a bird, trying to get a deal. They're all going away for a long time. I smiled, looking around at my home, my real home, not just a piece of real estate to be sold off. The walls that held so many memories would now hold a new one, the story of how I fought back against betrayal and won. Some people might say revenge isn't the answer. But sometimes, revenge isn't just about getting even, it's about standing up for yourself, about refusing to be a victim. It's about showing the world that you're stronger than anyone thought you could be. As I went to bed that night, in my apartment that no one could take from me, I felt nothing but pride. James and his criminal friends would have plenty of time to think about their choices from behind bars. And me? I had a whole new life ahead of me, free from lies, free from fear, and most importantly, free from a husband who thought he could break me. He learned the hard way: never underestimate a woman fighting for her home. 1 year later, I stood in my apartment's newly renovated kitchen, sipping coffee and reading the morning news on my tablet. The headline made me smile: real estate fraud ringleaders sentenced, former tech executive James Collins gets 15 years. The article included a photo from the courthouse, James in his orange jumpsuit, looking nothing like the polished businessman who'd once charmed me. His business partners had received even longer sentences. Mr. Chen got 20 years for being the ringleader. You sure you want to keep reading that? Lisa asked, walking into my kitchen. Since the arrest, our Friday morning coffee meetings have become a tradition. Just making sure it's over, I said, putting down the tablet. Sometimes it still feels like a bad dream. Lisa grabbed a muffin from the basket on my counter. Well, this part isn't a dream. Your story helped us crack 3 other fraud rings across the state. That reward money must be nice. I nodded, looking around my apartment. I'd used part of the reward to restore the place to its former glory, just like my grandmother would have wanted. New hardwood floors, updated appliances, but keeping all the vintage charm she'd loved so much. The best reward was helping those other families, I said. Remember that elderly couple who almost lost their home to James's group? How could I forget? They brought you cookies every week during the trial. My phone buzzed a notification from my real estate office, another award for top seller of the month. Turns out my experience had given me a unique perspective on protecting clients from fraud. I'd even started teaching seminars on real estate security. Got another date tonight? Lisa wiggled her eyebrows at me. Maybe I smiled. I'd met Tom, a lawyer who specialized in victim advocacy, at one of my seminars. Unlike James, he saw my success as something to celebrate, not exploit. Just remember, Lisa said, grabbing her jacket to head to work, if this one turns out to be a criminal too, we're doing things my way: first arrest, then revenge. I laughed, walking her to the door. Deal. But I think I've learned my lesson about spotting the red flags. After Lisa left, I walked out onto my balcony, my favorite spot for morning reflection. The city was waking up, sunlight glinting off distant windows. A year ago, I'd stood here feeling trapped and afraid. Now I felt only strength. My phone buzzed again. A text from Mrs. Rodriguez, the elderly lady whose house I'd saved from another fraud scheme made too many tamales again. Coming by to drop some off. I smiled, thinking about how my grandmother would have loved her. In trying to steal my home, James had helped me build a bigger one filled with friends, purpose, and a community of people looking out for each other. Later that evening, as I got ready for my date with Tom, I caught my reflection in the mirror. Gone was the scared woman who'd once touched her bruised cheek in this same spot. In her place stood someone stronger, wiser, but still kind. The buzzer rang. Tom was early, as usual. As I grabbed my purse, I touched the door frame like I always did, a habit my grandmother had started. For good luck, she used to say. But I didn't need luck anymore. I had something better, the knowledge that I could handle whatever life threw at me. After all, I was the woman who'd taken down a criminal empire while saving her home. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just exposing the truth, it's living your best life afterward. And that's exactly what I planned to do. Final thoughts. Looking back now, I realize my story isn't just about revenge, it's about the red flags I ignored and the lessons that might help others. Here's what I learned along the way. First, trust your gut. When James started having those secret phone calls, something felt wrong. I pushed that feeling aside because I wanted to believe in our marriage. Now I know those instincts were trying to protect me. Second, keep your independence. Even when James was pressuring me to sell my apartment, something told me to keep it in my name only. That decision saved me in the end. Financial independence isn't just about money, it's about having options when you need them most. Third, build a strong support system. Without Lisa, I might never have found the courage to fight back. You don't need a best friend in law enforcement, just people who'll stand by you when things get tough. Fourth, document everything. Those recordings and photos weren't just for the police, they protected me when James tried to twist the story later. In today's world, evidence is your best friend. But the biggest lesson? You're stronger than you think. There were moments when I wanted to give up, to just sign those papers and walk away. But something inside me refused to be a victim. Since sharing my story, I've received hundreds of messages from others who found themselves in similar situations. Some were facing financial abuse. Others were dealing with partners trying to steal their inheritance. Each one thought they were alone until they weren't. That's why I decided to start my support group for survivors of financial abuse. Every week, we meet in my apartment's community room, the same place where James once plotted against me. Now it's a space for healing and empowerment. Recently, one of the group members asked me if I regretted not seeing James's true nature sooner. I told her what my grandmother always said: life's greatest lessons often come wrapped in the hardest experiences. Yes, I lost my husband, but I gained something more valuable: wisdom, strength, and a chance to help others protect themselves. To anyone out there facing what I faced, whether it's a partner trying to take your home, your inheritance, or your dignity, remember this: you don't have to face it alone. There are people ready to help, laws to protect you, and strength within you that you haven't even discovered yet. Sometimes the best revenge isn't just about getting justice, it's about turning your pain into purpose. And that's exactly what I did. The end.